quite hang. Mike, can you leave your filming when you come to speak?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you just come more central to the chamber and just speak up because I can't find a mic that's working. Here we go. There's one more. So you just both come here to speak, and then you can go back to where you're sitting. If that's okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's Audit Committee. We aren't expecting any fire alarms or drills, so if the alarm does go off, if you exit through the front doors, down the ramp to the right and assemble adjacent to the cathedral. We'll start as we usually do with a round of introductions. So we can start with you, Patrick, and we'll go around.
Thank you. My name is Patrick McAllister. I'm the Councillor for Horse and Harborside.
Ferry Buckles, I'm the Councillor for St George Troopers Hill.
Simon Cook's an independent member. David Wilcox, Councillor for Lockleys.
John Geeser, Councillor for Avonmouth and Norris Western.
Jonathan Harker, Councillor for Stockwood.
Zoe Lynn, I'm Councillor for Filwood Ward.
Barry Norris, key audit partner from Grant Thornton.
Richard Young, Head of Strategic Finance. Tony Woodlock, Finance Business Partner.
Denise Murray, Director of Finance.
Alison Mullis, Deputy Chief Internal Auditor.
John Clayton, Capital Finance Accountant.
Joachim
Hennessy, Principal Finance Officer.
Louise Lee, Internal Audit.
Phil Eames, Internal Audit Manager.
Naomi Ferguson, Head of Procurement and Contract Management.
Steve Amundsen, Chief Internal Auditor.
Alison Taylor, Clerk to the Committee.
And I'm Andrew Brown, the Chair of the Committee. We'd like to welcome Patrick, who's joining the committee and taking the place of Councillor Tony Dyer, who is standing down from the committee and also as, obviously also as Vice Chair. So I'd like to put on record my thanks to Tony over the past, for his help and support over the past couple of years. Councillor Wilcox will be becoming Vice Chair. That should have been ratified last week, but obviously full council was postponed. So fingers crossed when that's rearranged, and I understand that's not quite happened yet. We shall have that formally ratified. Okay, moving on to apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, apologies from Councillor Cole and from Adebola Adebayo, and I note that Councillor Pogbey's not yet here.
Lovely, thank you very much. Do any members have any declarations of interest with regard to today's agenda? No, that's great. The minutes of the previous meeting. Now, I wasn't here at the last meeting, so I'm looking to members to highlight any issues they may have with the minutes. I shall take silence as suggesting that they are accurate, a fair and accurate representation. So we shall move on to the action sheet. Do any members have any questions or queries with regards to the actions on the action sheet? I did have one personally, and that is to do with the corporate risk report. There was an action with regards to the ordering of the corporate risk report, and then there seems to have been some discussion around whether that should be numerically upwards or numerically downwards. And I think what might have been getting asked for was that they be rated by the highest rated risk first, and then in a decreasing order. But I'm looking to members of the committee who may or may not have raised that to confirm my understanding.
I think I might be the one that asked for it and asked for highest descending.
Yeah, and that's what you mean, that the sort of the one that's, you know, the highest rated risk as opposed to the highest number, yeah?
Highest risk, yeah.
So, if we... Okay, thank you.
Noted.
So moving on, if there's no other comments on the action sheet, we'll move on to public forum. We've had 2 statements in for public forum. One from Mike Aldrieve and then from Dan. So if you can have Mike, if you want to come forward to the mic and make your statement in a minute, summarise your statement. We have all received it, so members will have actually read the content, so if you can summarise it, that'd be great.
Basically, I'm saying I believe that the Audit Committee's remit for ensuring good governance means that it must consider the behaviours of the monitoring officer and the head of legal services in their unlawful appointments of independent persons to the members' complaints process. Obviously that process, the scrutiny of that falls within the B&E committee. I'm concerned that these people were appointed unlawfully. We don't know who they are. The monitoring officer has shown so little integrity in his answers to us. We're still waiting for answers to our supplementaries from the 3rd of November. We've not had an opportunity, he didn't appear at that committee, neither did the independent member. I've been labelled politically motivated by these people. They're nameless, they're not identified. That's clearly not acceptable in any democracy. And the public need to know. We need clarity rather than an attempt to so-called regularise these appointments. We need to know, and confirmation, were they legally appointed in the past, because we don't believe they were, and the monitoring officer won't confirm that they were. Were the information that was shared with these people, was that lawful to share that information, or was it a breach of our GDPR? Because I didn't consent to any sharing with these people because they weren't legally appointed, so how could I? And also, whether payments made to these people were actually lawful items of account, because under what basis were they made? So I think members of this committee have to actually press for clarity on this, rather than try attempting to, as I said, regularise something which is highly irregular. They need to understand what's been going on, what the weaknesses are, and why V&E have been, don't seem to have been adequately briefed in the law. The section 7 of the Localism Act runs to 3 pages.
Can you bring in the max across?
Yeah, I've round up, but I mean 3 pages. So why weren't members adequately appraised of this? This has been going on since probably 2016, when the last incumbent deceased. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dan Ackroyd, could you come and give your minute as well, please?
The people of Bristol must be able to trust the council will follow the law. Currently, I can't do that. It is intolerable that the monitoring officer, the person who is meant to be promoting integrity and standards in the council, does not appear to be following the law and is refusing to answer questions. If I can't trust this council, then I can't trust that if a letter arrived from the central government in 2017 that said that the gaps reported by tenants did not compromise the structural safety of the building, but did require remedial action to ensure continued fire complementation, that such a letter wouldn't simply be chucked in the bin. We need to have trust. Members of the Audit Committee need to use their position of power to tell the monitoring officer to stop trying to cover up what has happened, no matter how inconvenient it is for members of this committee or the monitoring officer.
Well, thank you. Okay, there's no debate on statements, so we'll move on to the next item, which is to note the work programme. Does any members have any comments on the work programme as it's outlined? Okay. Right. So we're moving on to the reports proper now. We have until about 3 o'clock to deal with the first part of the agenda, as we are going to be getting joined by members of Resources Scrutiny and the Chair of People Scrutiny at around about 3 to look at item 18. So if it looks like time is tight, I might have to curtail some members if they're making overall statements. But the first item on the agenda is the verbal update from Grant Thornton on the 21-22 external audit.
Thank you, Chair. So I can confirm that we've received all the outstanding information that we've requested. There is one issue in relation to financial instruments that we just need to review to make sure that all our queries have been resolved. We're also waiting for an updated annual governance statement, and once that has been received and we've completed all our review procedures, then we anticipate issuing the audit opinion in the next couple of weeks.
Short and sweet, thank you. Do any members have any queries on that update? No? Okay, well, thank you very much for the update. We look forward to seeing you again at the next committee. Or maybe not the next one, it will be the one after, I guess. Right, moving on to item 9, Treasury Management Mid-Year Report, and that's John Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report. This is one of 3 reports, the other being Treasury Management Strategy, Treasury Management Report, and this report, the Mid-Year Report. And this provides an activity for the first 6 months of the year. This report is purely for noting purposes. There are no recommendations in the report, In addition, there's no policy changes to the Treasury strategy or the approved indicators that were approved by full council in February. I can confirm that councils comply with all the various codes of practice, including the Prudential Code, Treasury Code, and investment guidance issued by central government. The purpose of these codes is to ensure that capital investment decisions are affordable, prudent, sustainable, and within agreed parameters approved by full council, including the Treasury, borrowing, and investment activity. The key points in the report are summarised now. The council set up a medium hectare environment of 641 million to support the general fund and new build programmes within the HRA. The council has not borrowed any funding during the first part of the year, but it's currently planning on borrowing around about 60 million short-term borrowing during the latter parts of the financial year to support the finance of the capital programme and ensure adequate treasury resources are available to meet the obligations of the council. The cost of such borrowing is included in the MTFB. Borrowing is lower than the anticipated original estimate of 100 million that was set out in the Treasury Management Strategy, and this was in part due to delays in delivery of the capital programme. Short-term borrowing is planned as interest rates across all maturity periods are expected to fall over the coming years, when loans are expected to mature, when these loans are refinanced at a lower rate. Treasury balances were £116 million at the start of the year and have currently fell to around about 88 million at the midpoint, with treasury balance expected to be circa £50 million at the end of the financial year, based on changes to working capital, use of reserves, and the delivery of the capital programme. Our treasury investments are invested in highly rated and liquid money market funds, along with fixed deposits and other local authorities and banks. And these would be normally a longer duration to pick up some additional yield, but also be staggered so flow of receipts will also flow deliveries, so it meets obligations when they fall due. The table at paragraph 12 in your pack on page 23 provides you with a summary of our debt and investments at a high level. There's also an economic update also on page 23, giving a commentary of the past 6 months of the year. The current report indicates there's no change in base rate until mid-2024, and then further falls to 2.75% in December 25. I'd also point out that as part of paragraph 25, on page 27, debt restructuring opportunities. There's more opportunities for debt restructuring opportunities going forwards since the change in yields across the yield period of all borrowing. That's the key points of the report. The remainder of the report looks at all the various prudential indicators approved by full council, which we're currently complying with. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Jonathan and then David.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very quick question. In fact, I did have two questions, but you answered one of them in your comprehensive presentation, so thank you for that. We reviewed the Treasury Management Report relating to last year at the last Audit Committee meeting, and in that report it said that the expected borrowing over the next 5 years, so 23 to 28, under the medium-term financial strategy was, I think, 608 million, but it's now 641. So I wondered if it was kind of an evolving document, if the plan was something that was rolling, or if there was any other reason for the increase.
I would probably need to refer back to those reports to see why there was such a change. Normally, our borrowing requirement would only change when there's a change in the plans used to finance the capital programme. So unless anything changes on the capital programme change, then I would only expect changes to happen if our plan delivery capital changes, which we find by borrowing. I can have a look at both these reports.
Okay, thanks. That would be helpful. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Yeah, if you could respond to that via Alison, and we'll circulate that around the committee. David.
Yes, thank you, Richard, for your report. I know we've spoken about this previously, but I still can't see any mention of a loan for the Bristol Beacon to pay for the work on that. Is that going to be kicking in anytime soon?
Yeah, so this report primarily looks at our treasury investments. So any loans to third parties, which isn't for treasury crucial class of service loans, and they form part of other budget reports. They're not included in this report.
So this isn't, I don't know how the loan is actually phrased for the Bristol Beacon, but I thought we were paying for a lot of the work, not actually giving the money straight to the Bristol Music Trust to spend.
Yeah, I'm not, in terms of, there's no physical loans of Bristol Beacon as part of our accounts as at the moment. I can confirm that.
Does anybody know where that would appear, please?
It's the funding of the capital programme, that's what we're referring to, and the Bristol Beacon line within our overarching capital programme. You won't see each project and the funding for each project separately identified, but when we get to the end of the year you'll have the detailed breakdown of the complete financing of the capital programme. It's dealt with at the bottom line, etc. And then we can provide you the detail if you want to on any specific scheme.
I look forward to that report. Thank you.
Sylvie.
Yeah, on point 12, the table on page 23. Could you remind me why there is such a big increase in the debt position from 446 to 526 within this year, and the net borrowing position going up 146? And I think also most of the investments got a rate of return, but the mid-year one, the 88, doesn't. Is that just, it's missing?
In terms of the rate, I can get that for you. It just must be missing. Not sure why that's happened. Apologies for that. In terms of our net debt increasing, that's primarily because we're funding the capital programme. So we haven't taken any borrowing at the moment, but we still are using our cash resources to fund the capital programme, and that's the primary reason why our net debt is going up. It will also be to do with, in previous years, we've actually financed our borrowing using our own cash, which is called internal borrowing. And as those reserves and balances fall, that means our net debt will increase as well.
Patrick.
Thank you for your presentation. I was noting at the bottom of page 31, it was saying we do expect we'll have sufficient funds to cover capital investment. Obviously this is an ongoing situation, but I was wondering if any work has been done to update or reaffirm this view in light of last week's evacuation and survey of Barton House. Obviously that's potentially a very expensive process, and I'm wondering if we've got any work ongoing to identify the impact that might have on these budgets.
In terms of, I would imagine that will form part of the HRA business plan, so that should come through as part of that budget process. Sure.
Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to provide some clarity around the questions that were asked by Councillor Goodman and Councillor Wilcox. In terms of Zoe's question about the rate of return not being shown in the table, it's actually 4.72%, which is shown just underneath the table, but it just so happens that it's missing from that particular cell in the table. And I think as far as Councillor Wilcox's question is concerned, the actual funding of the Bristol Beacon project is being met from existing cash surpluses, which is why the net debt is going up. Even though the gross debt isn't going up, it's because cash surpluses are reducing.
Thank you, Jonathan. I had a couple of questions and comments on this. One was with regards to the point on page 26 and bullet point 23, which talks about, it says about rebooking the council's debt as time goes by, and it's just from an assurance point of view, an assurance that, you know, that was being looked at before rates rose to the heights that they are at the moment, and that, you know, opportunities just weren't there to rebroke at a lower rate.
So in previous, so what we do on a treasury management basis is look at how much cash you've got in hand, and if we have significant levels of cash, then we make a choice of whether to delay borrowing or take out borrowing at a time when it would actually cost the council. So that would have been if we've had interest rates where our investment returns are significantly low compared to borrowing rates, we would make a judgment call whether it's cost effective to actually go out and borrow, while there's a cost of carry to the council in terms of taking out that borrowing.
Lovely, thank you. And on the capital programme, the table shows a fall in the level of capital receipts between the approved programme and the period 6 forecast. What's the sort of headline explanation for that? Sorry, that's the table in bullet point 31 on page 28.
So in terms of financing the capital programme, the capital, so the HRA had a larger programme at the start of the year, and the capital receipts were used to finance a large element of their programme. Their capital programme is actually stalled, well, it's reduced, and therefore the level of capital receipts needed to support that programme is reduced. Therefore, we re-analyse the financing to support and most ultimately used to finance the capital programme overall.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious of time today. David, one last point and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Councillor Hacker, for your explanation. So I'd like to ask another question about the table on point 31 on page 28. So the funding for the Bristol Beacon would come out of which line there? Capital grants? Or one of the other lines, please? So I'm fully equipped to deal with the report when it comes.
Okay, sorry, is that question to me? Well, it would be...
No, I wasn't asking you.
So the Bristol Beacon is actually funded by multiple sources, so it's got grants, but the item you're referring to would be borrowing.
That's interesting because that figure's actually gone down, and I would be expecting it to go up to pay for all the work on the Bristol Beacon.
Yeah, because the way certain projects are financed by borrowing, if those schemes were delayed or paused, that would mean not as much borrowing is needed to support those schemes. So it's done on a collective basis.
Well, I'm even more interested to read that.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on from this at the moment. We're asked to note the report, so I'll consider it noted. I'll also note that Councillor Hucker is obviously after an officer's job at some point. Okay, moving on, we've got the Q2 Corporate Risk Report update from Hakeem. We're asked to review and comment on the report. We had hoped to have the risk owner of CRR 12 here today, which is the risk that deals with emergency responses. Unfortunately, they're still busy with the live incident. So they are not going to be able to be here and answer any specific questions on that, but they will take written questions. So if you have got questions, we can channel them through Alison accordingly. Okay. Hakim?
Thank you. This is the Q2 2023-24 corporate risks. We have 1 critical risk, 24 high risk, 4 medium. It says 23, there should 24. 5 improving risks. 2 actually deteriorating because it says 3 because we have external risk deteriorating as well, so we calculated that wrongly. And 2 escalated. I'm just going to start with the critical risk, which is on the children placed in unregistered provision, which is unlawful. Now, we've been working with the officers on this. There are mitigations in place. You will see at the section below, we introduce a section where it's listing the number of new mitigations coming in with section 3.13. For every high and critical risk, what we've done is to actually stay with the work with the officers and to look at what are the critical mitigations, also controls that we should be placed to give assurance. There are 5 improvement risks. There's on business continuity and operational resilience, possible financial framework and midterm financial plan, capital portfolio, and then financial sustainability of nursery schools. Again, we've been tracking feedback from the officers, looking at the actions that were suggested a few quarters ago, and most of them have been implemented, and they're giving us assurance that these risks are now improving. We have 2 deteriorating risks in Q2. That's the possible failure to deliver effective corporate health and safety, well-being. Again, engaging with the officers, there are new mitigations that's been assigned to look at this threat as well, to at least keep an eye on it and make sure that we're able to manage it. And this other one is CRR12, which was highlighted to us, but the officers could only hear today on the emergency plan and response. The external risk deterrent is the possible increase in winter flu because of COVID-19. It's been added just for precaution. Generally, most people think COVID will not be as it's been in the last few years, but going towards winter, there will be a spike again in flu, and so we thought we have to step up the controls and mitigations again just to track the emergency there. We have 2 escalating risks: the potential threat to adult social care quality commission assurance preparedness, and also the possible failure to improve compliance with procurement rules, which result in procurement breaches. These 2, even though procurement is there, but we've now escalated it because we thought it's important to give it that visibility, but also there are controls in place and mitigations that we're tracking for these 2 deteriorating risks. We've added a section, which is an emerging risk, begin to look at what's coming up, horizon scanning, potentials, and there's 1 currently, which is reinforced autoclave accreted concrete, which is RASC. It's an emerging strategy risk. We've had plans to look at council's portfolio generally, so the work going on at the moment, and I tend to bring that to the Audit Committee for Q3 report as well. Section 3.12, we've identified systems risk with static score. We're now beginning to challenge threats that's been static for a long time with no movements, perhaps maybe the last 1 year, and looking at the quality of the internal controls or the mitigation plans, just to make sure that if a particular risk is quite high, if they're high, and we need to make sure that the action plan, the corresponding mitigations and action plan actually make commensurate enough to give assurance that we're doing something. And if we need to escalate for further decision, we have to. So we've informed all the officers that Q3 will need a level of assurance why those risks are still static in the last 1 year. So a lot of challenge, a lot of deep dive going on, a lot of support for the officers going on. And we have 45 new mitigations from Q1 to Q2. That's the extent of the engagement we've had with the officers, just ensuring that we reinforce areas where there are potential threats and make sure that we have the stability for monitoring the mitigation plans as well. Also, just generally, we improve our system so that every DMT, everyone can now see live in the dashboard on time, risks that are due or coming due, action plans coming up with you, and we're happy to say that improvement will help to assist officers to early intervention of risks, not being openly missing any action plan or missing any controls.
Thank you. Questions? As any members of the committee have got questions with regards to David?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question about CRR 25, the suitability of line of business systems. Its current risk assessment is 20, but the risk tolerance level is 10. But reading from the one-pager on page 53, we're not going to be mitigating this risk till February 2028. I'd be expecting to see some more progress on that earlier to try and fix that.
We'll take notes and feedback with the officers. I know we spent time looking at this particularly as well, so definitely we'll report back to Q3.
Any other questions, members? Johnson.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is a stupid or obvious question really, but I can't see an item specifically relating to the dedicated schools grant. Does that fall within CRR 13?
CRR 13? So I can get the question.
Yeah, the dedicated schools grant, obviously there's a risk, a serious risk around that as there's a deficit on it. Is that risk identified within CRR 13? Only I can't actually see a separate item on the risk register for it.
I can respond to that, Councillor Hucker. So we have some of our risks are overarching risks, of which there are subsets that are in each of the services. The financial risk in-year deficit is one that sits as and only covers the entire council and any potential risk of in-year deficits. And the financial framework and medium-term financial plan will also cover the DSG as well, because that's over the medium term. It will cover social care and all of those key risks. And within each of their specific service risk registers, they'll have a detailed plan in relation to their service risk and how that's being managed.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? If not, I had a couple. So I've got a couple on the CRR 12 risk that we were hoping to explore today, which I'll forward on to the head of service via Alison, and I'll ask other committee members to do the same. If they could copy me in when they're emailing Alison, we thought that'd be great. I had a couple of queries. One was, and again, you might have to take this away and come back. CRR 27, the failure to the risk of failing to deliver the capital transport programme. It's got mitigation actions which were due in September, which had zero progress to date, according to the summary. So I was wondering if we could maybe have an update on where that's at. And I guess, and again, this will probably tie in with, to some extent, with the queries that we had on CRR 12 with regards to emergency planning, but on CRR 52, that's the risk that there's a possible failure to ensure high-rise properties meet safety regulations in the Building Safety Act, and I wonder if that's, if the risks that have been that will be identified following the incident in Barton House, well, that's going to feed into A, the assessment of that risk, and B, the mitigating measures that are required. So those were my main questions that I had of the report. But if there are no other questions from the committee, we are asked to review. Oh, sorry. Oh, now we've got a forest of hands. again, I am conscious of time and I will keep things moving, but Zoe and Patrick, I've seen your hands now.
Yeah, thanks. On the summary table, I was getting a bit confused, and I think it's to do with the placement of the little mini grids with the dots. Some of them are wrong. Could you just go back and make sure they're correct for the next one? So like 21s or something. I was just looking at it, it's like that risk has gone down a lot, and actually it's just the little 4x4 grids being wrong.
That's okay. Maybe leave that as a statement if you want, unless you want to respond specifically.
I need clarification, please. I just want to. Which one? Is it the table presentation?
There's quite a few. I can show you where to find if you want.
Okay.
If you look, you can see some of the 21s.
Thank you.
Okay, and Patrick.
In the interest of time, I can make it a written question if that's preferable.
I think it might be actually. If you can submit it to Alex and copy me in, and when the answers come through, we'll circulate them to the full committee so that everybody can have sight of those as well. Thank you. Okay. In that case, we've reviewed and commented on that, and we'll move on to item 11, which is internal audit half-year report. And that's Simba.
Thank you, Chair. This is a half-year report that gives an update from April to October. This also includes some of the work that I've already told you about. Just in short, we have certified 36 grants worth 31 million. There's work that's ongoing in terms of implementation of audit actions. The report is very clear in terms of the need to sustain the current trajectory given where we were. I also want to mention the fact that our partnership agreement with KPMG is expiring in January, so we're in the process of looking for another strategic partner. The Appendix 1 will indicate all the work that has been completed and outcomes. It also indicates any work that is still work in progress. You'll notice that within that schedule, there's NA. This reflects to not applicable. These are instances where we have not provided any opinion because it relates to better assurance where we're working with management to support them on projects. Chair, I'll stop here and take any questions in terms of that appendix before we move to appendix 2.
Okay. Members, do you have any specific questions on Simba's part of the report before we move on to the limited assurance paper? No, you've got off scot-free today, Simba. And do you want to move on?
Yes, Phil will take us to the appendix 2.
Thank you, Simba. Colleagues will see the audit summary. We were asked to review the transition of young people in care between children's and adult services. Colleagues in those services were already aware that there were issues with that transition journey and had already commissioned a project to address those acknowledged issues. We carried out a review, provided limited assurance. The findings of that review have been taken into account. The project to address that is now underway, and we are attending the project board to provide oversight. The respective directors of the two services are present to answer any questions which the committee may have, so I'll hand over to those colleagues now.
Afternoon. I'm Fiona Tudge, Director of Children and Families, and I was just going to make a few comments and then hand over to Meta, Director of Adults. So really it was just to kind of bring together kind of the summary of the report, and what we kind of felt was that the report was kind of grouped into two main themes, the data and the insight and the protocols and processes around that work. And together they were impacting and do impact on the support for the young people and families receive at this kind of significant point in their lives. So we've taken both kind of strategic and tactical actions to address those. As Phil says, we have now got a transitions project launched earlier this year. It's got a dedicated project team, and Meta and I sponsor that, and there are regular meetings to address and make progress against this. We have made some progress. The report kind of highlights some of that. We've looked at more data analysts and recording, and we've completed 80% now of our audits by young people who are 13 years and above who may present to our colleagues in adult social care. And we've also done quite a significant piece of work looking at other local authorities and benchmarking how other local authorities have managed this area of work. We want to make sure that we get this right and we use best kind of practice and research and evidence from other local authorities. That's been quite a comprehensive piece of work. And at our last meeting, we reported back on some of the positives and in other local authorities, not something that we could kind of lift and shift into Bristol, but really kind of looking at the elements in other local authorities that would make sense to Bristol and improve our practice.
Hello, so yes, I'm Lily Jacobson, Director of Adult Social Care. We felt that there was a need to take some immediate actions in response to the internal audit. So these are just some of the things that we did over the summer. So you will probably have seen from the report that the team was operating in two halves, one for under 18s and one for over 18s. One of the first actions that we took was actually to join those two together in order to make better use of the resources that we have. And through that, we've been able to very significantly reduce the waiting list. We also had a real push on recruitment and actually achieved full recruitment over the summer. Unfortunately, since then, 2 people have moved on, so we are still recruiting, but it did show that we were able to do so. The final thing was to introduce some additional resource into the team. So one of the things that we had some concerns about was oversight in the team, the capacity that they had to manage their volume of work. So we've introduced an additional team manager in order to strengthen oversight of the service. So that was just to share with you some of the immediate actions that were taken on receiving the internal audit. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, does anyone have a question? David and then John.
Yes, thank you for your report. One comment about the way the report is presented first before I leap into my questions. On section 1.5, you talk about 4 high priority and 5 medium findings, and then you leap into them. It would be really good to actually separate them out as high and medium priority so that there's no ambiguity about what you think are high and medium ones. So if that could be retrospectively done in the report, that would be useful. My first question is, the first point of that paragraph 1.5 talks about internal audit. We're unable to confirm that all young people requiring transition support have been identified and were preparing for transition. Do we have any idea of the scale of the number of people who fell through the cracks, please?
So that's the bit. I'm not sure, Mike, have you got the numbers in terms of what we had? But that's the bit that we talked about, kind of getting through the systems and having it now known 80%. And what the report refers to is because we were operating, and we do operate in 3 systems, so it's trying to bring all that piece of work together. So we have now nearly completed pulling that cohort of young people together. And it's got the actual figures.
So up until the point that this report was written, we had identified 1,690 young people, so a very significant number, and there was still some to be validated. I would add to that, though, not to get too, other than the fact that the number is significant, not to get too bogged down in the very specific number. This is taking a worst-case scenario approach to it, and we know that not all of the people who have, or all of the young people who have EHCPs will present for adult social care. So this is taking a sort of worst-case or best-case scenario, rather, overview of the young people that might one day present to adult social care. But we know that all of them will not. So that's what we've got to do, and as Fiona says, 80% of them have been identified. I would add to that one of the things that the project needs to identify is actually scope of the young people's service. When the service was set up, it was set up to support mainly disabled children who were coming through disabled children's service. And I think one of the questions that we have ourselves in terms of the numbers of young people who might transition is what the scope of that service is and the kinds of young people that they support.
Thank you. It really is our job to get bogged down in the figures. That's why we're here.
Yes.
So I really would like some figures about how many children actually didn't get picked up, please.
As of today, I can't tell you the answer to that question.
Could we have a written reply, please?
We will go away.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jonathan? Sorry, not Jonathan, John.
Thank you for the report. I have residents that have fallen through the cracks in this area, and one of the messages from them really was around communication. Is that something that you've been looking at? Because I think one of the complaints was they fell through the cracks and it was kind of the 16th birthday and then they were in limbo. So I'm assuming you're looking at these a lot earlier, but if you're looking at the communication aspect, it can kind of help pick up some of those cases before they fall through the cracks. So I just wanted some sort of assurance that the communication with parents, for example, was being looked at.
I think inherent in the planning, what we're trying to achieve is that we identify young people from the age of 14. And if we do so, and we have them in our sights the whole time, then communication should fall well out of that, because we'll know exactly who they are and we'll know when to step in.
And some of that is linked to the kind of the management oversight and the supervision, so ensure that we are aware of the children and then appropriate workers have appropriate supervision in order to be able to feed back to parents.
Any more questions from members? Simon?
Two quick questions. First is for Simba though, I think. In terms of our assurance, it says progress in italics. Is that internal audit's view of progress or is that management's view of progress?
It's probably a joint view of progress in terms of there were management responses in the initial report which formed then the first draft of the summary. However, the colleagues have updated those to give the most recent view of progress since the report was published. So they produced that. We have a quick look at it to see that it matches our understanding, but we haven't as yet done a re-audit to confirm the detailed progress.
And so could I just ask when we're likely to receive that re-audit?
So I think so. Every limited assurance will do a review after 6 months, just to give management the opportunity to put action in place and to embed the arrangements.
And if I could just add, that partly depends on the due dates that are in the report and are agreed, in that we want to give management an appropriate time to be able to put things in place. Yes, we want to encourage prompt action, but we have to be realistic when there is a lot to do.
No, I fully appreciate that, but my question is when will we get it? On that basis, when will we get it?
So the protocol is that we'll do this review probably in Q1 for next year, and then you get the outcome the following audit committee. If it is limited again, then you get the full report, but if it is not, you get just confirmation that things are now okay.
And in the meantime, I'm sitting on the project board that is overseeing the project, so I'll be able to keep an eye on progress, and as Simba says, we'll do full follow-up in the first part of next year.
Thank you. I had a comment and a question. First of all, clearly this has been a major issue, but there's also, you can see from the report, there's been a number, quite a number of steps in place, already taken to seek to rectify that, which is obviously positive. So, again, like other members, I'll look forward to, seeing the results of the re-audit and hopefully not, having another session like this one. I don't know quite how to phrase this question. was ultimately the issue that those people who were transitioning between the two services was ultimately the issue that there wasn't necessarily the one person or the one role overseeing whose overall responsibility for those people, and is that something that is being addressed? I.e., is one of the services taking overall responsibility for that transition?
I would say, as the report sets out, there wasn't one main contributory reason. I think there were multiple reasons, which was both about management oversight and about data and our insights and our ability to identify. But it was also that systemically it was quite fractured because it sits between children's and adult services. So that fracturing is probably where most of the root causes are sitting. So for myself and Fiona, the reason why we're here together today is really to show our commitment to making sure that that fracturing ceases and we have comprehensive overview.
Okay, thank you. David, one last question. I'm again really conscious of time today.
One last question. I note that you're transferring to a Power BI dashboard to this in future. Can members have access to this Power BI dashboard, please, so that we can get a feel for how things are working?
I think it's a difficult one. I think Councillor Oakes, but I'll take the action and then I'll come back to you on that. I just want to be comfortable that whatever is being shared, I think it's appropriate. So I'll take the point and come back to you on that.
I probably just want to caveat it wouldn't be standard for members to have access to a Power BI dashboard that has lots of detailed information and confidential information. So I wouldn't anticipate that being an acceptable approach, but I'll let Simba look into it before we come back.
Thanks, Denise. If there could be a high-level version, that could be useful, but I'll leave that where it is. Just a final thing on this report, I was going to forward it on to the chair of People Scrutiny, who is sat just over there for their information as well, and I am going to move on to, well, we're asked to note the report and also note the internal audit summary and take assurance from management, and if there's no further comments, I'm going to move on to the counter fraud report.
Good afternoon, thank you. So some of the key messages from our half-year fraud report are that we have achieved 34 outcomes from our tenancy fraud work, and that is responsible for the bulk of the notional £4 million savings. We've identified recoverable savings of £560,000, and we are increasing our focus on fraud prevention work and are implementing a fraud prevention plan strategy. The bulk of our proactive fraud work in the first half of the year has been around the National Fraud Initiative data. We received over 14,000 matches. Work on that today has saved some £221,000. We undertook a blue badge enforcement event in the city centre back in September. We have 3 ongoing cases in respect of suspected misuse of blue badges. I think it's important to note that we always get a lot of public support for those events, in particular from blue badge holders. We've worked closely with colleagues reviewing guardianship payments. We carried out some checks for them, and we've also worked with them on reviewing their controls and documentation with a view to preventing fraud. We're working with services across the council as part of the fraud prevention plan to develop fraud risk assessments, the aim being that every service will have a fraud risk assessment in place. So we've been doing a lot of work to educate and support managers and providing some online guidance and tools for them to use. We've been delivering fraud awareness training and fraud awareness messages, and that will continue in the second half of the year. Notably, we've had increased engagement with schools this year, which has been really positive. And we will continue to develop the fraud hub. We're always looking for new data sets, both internal and external. Keep trying to work with neighbouring local authorities and registered housing providers on that. And we'll be continuing work on the fraud risk assessments as part of the fraud prevention strategy. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions from members? John?
Just a really quick one. With regards to things like blue badges, from a fraud point of view, I'd imagine the biggest element is somebody using a badge that isn't theirs. Do you look at things like having photographic ID on there, like you would a taxi licence, for example?
There is a photograph of the badge holder on the badge.
Fabian?
Yeah, I mean, going through this report, it does seem to be an awful lot of sort of what I call potentially small ticket stuff. What are we doing about this fraud, where people, you know, larger works, costing several £1 million, and how are we making sure that we're not being defrauded in those larger?
So I did miss part of that. Any certain type of fraud.
Yeah, it just seems to be sort of small things like, somebody's, using a blue badge incorrectly and stuff like that, and misusing one. How about sort of the larger fraud risk areas where we could potentially be done out of millions?
So we are doing some work in the area of procurement fraud. That's not my area, so I don't know whether Simba will have more information about that. The other area we want to do more is direct payments, because that's lots of money. We're working with the Cabinet Office on ways to use the data on that at the moment. But yes, Simba, do you want to pick up about the procurement?
Yes, so I think the difficulty with some of those big things that you're talking about, you always receive, I think, some consents, but some of it just comes to collusion, and it's very, very difficult to prove. So yes, there's work that's happening, and I think the stuff that colleagues in procurement and us are working on, trying to see whether we can use some of those fraud red flags on procurement, but that area is very, very difficult. You find that a lot of people publish that there's a lot of procurement fraud, but there are very, very, very few instances where that is actually proven, because it's very, very difficult to prove. But we are alive to that. That risk is there, and we try to do as much as we can to make sure that that's mitigated. So the key issue, I think, is not about investigating, it's about preventing, so that that risk doesn't materialize. Because once it has materialized, it's very, very difficult to prove. So the work that's being done is around prevention, and that's where we focus our energy.
Just one quick comeback to that, I'm going to check. Do we have a process in place of making sure that we check that work has been done before we pay the bill? Because otherwise you get people, I'm just saying this from my own sort of public sector fraud awareness training that I've had to do. It's very easy for someone to inflate a bill or charge for something that hasn't been done, unless we actually go and check, that the repairs have been carried out or this or that. Unless we check it's been done before we pay, then we could be paying and haven't done the work, they've just taken the money.
So some of these things have to be managed through contract management, because I think the service which have commissioned that work are responsible for making sure that they are paying for what they've commissioned. So yes, that's why we want working set to make sure that we have sufficient controls to make sure that we are paying for what we have commissioned. But it has to be, I think it has to be part of prevention, not the end process where you're looking for or to recover money. But yes, the controls around that are the most important ones to look at. But it has to be done through contract management.
So those are people involved in contract management trained in dealing with fraud and how to be aware of fraud?
Yeah, I can answer that. So we've got quite a robust training programme for all officers who commission services or our contract managers, and that includes fraud prevention, paying timely invoices once work is complete. So it's quite a robust training that all council officers responsible for those areas have to undertake as mandatory.
Okay, thank you for that. If there's no other comments on the counter fraud report, then we shall note it and move on. I do note that we have now been joined by a couple of members of Resources Scrutiny. I'm afraid we're not quite at the agenda item yet. I'm trying to canter through this as quickly as possible, but we're not quite there. The next item, though, should be quite quick to get through. It's the Audit Committee's half-year report to full council 23-24. I've had input into this, and I'm going to ask that a further clause is added just to thank Councillor Tony Dyer for his work as Vice Chair, because obviously by the time it comes to full council he won't. Well, he's already no longer Vice Chair, really. So other than that, are there any brief comments? If not, I shall consider it approved and we can move on to the next item. Oh, lovely. The next item on the agenda is the Internal Audit Quality Assurance Improvement Programme and then the Internal Audit Plan for 23-24, the Q4 priorities. SIMBA has kindly offered to move those down to the bottom of the agenda, which will give us an opportunity to look at the DSG. We've got the procurement compliance update, so we can have the procurement compliance update, and then we'll move on to the items on the DSG deficit reduction programme, and we'll come back to those audit items later on.
Chair, can I just remind you that one of the DSG items will be an exempt item, so you'll be going public, exempt, public.
Yes. But that's fine. I think, given that we've got members here from Resources, that we can, it'll give us an opportunity to move on to that as quickly as possible, and then that frees up the rest of their afternoon. But if we could go on to the procurement compliance update, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you. I'm Matt King, Governance and Performance Manager within the Procurement and Contract Management Service. The reports that I presented set out the current position as regards non-compliance with the Council's internal procurement rules, which is broadly that there is lower non-compliance than last financial year, but the numbers are still high. The report sets out the management actions that have been undertaken or are already complete. I would highlight that a number of the key actions underway involve changes to working practices, and in those instances, progress on those items may take time to filter through into lower non-compliance numbers. So the report provides an update on non-compliance with the Council's own procurement rules, as well as assurance regarding actions being taken by the Council to improve compliance levels. And just to also note that data on non-compliance will be provided as part of the end-of-year report for the committee and external audit. Thank you, and happy to take your question.
Okay, Jonathan.
Thank you. Just a very quick question. The report states that there were 342 breaches in financial year 22-23 and 125 in Q2 23-24. I assume that figure of 125 is a cumulative figure?
It is, yes. I noticed that, sorry, apologies. It's Q1 and Q2 together.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions, comments from members? No? Okay, well, we are asked to note the data on the procurement breaches and action underway to improve procurement compliance, and we shall consider that noted. And then if we move to... do we have all the members of Resources who we anticipated would be here? Okay. If members of resources and people scrutiny are happy to, we shall skip the comfort break and move straight on to the DSG Deficit Reduction Programme, the public paper that we've got in front of us.
Hello.
Hi.
So my name is Tommy Jarvis.
I'm Gary May. And so we're here to talk to you through the DSG deficit programme, the reduction programme. So you should have received the papers. Outlining where we are and what we're trying to do.
Microphone's off.
Just leave it, press one. Thank you. So obviously, in recent years, the increase in demand for education, health and care plans has placed significant pressure on where we are in terms of the high needs block funding. This has resulted in a significant deficit in the high needs block funding, which it continues to increase and is likely to increase to around £58 million this year. Any local authority that has a deficit in its DSG position needs to put forward a mitigation plan to try and address some of those and work with the DFE to ensure that that meets it gets under control. So Bristol, as part of its mitigation plan, put forward 14 specific pieces of work last year, which were signed off by Schools Forum. They're outlined in section 3.4 of the report as a brief overview. Some of those projects and programs are being taken forward as part of business as usual. Some of them are also standalone projects that are funded by Department for Education's Delivering Better Value in SEND programme. 4 of these pieces of work that were in the mitigation plans from last September have been taken forward as part of the Delivering Better Value with SEND programme. Specifically, they're the review of the high needs block element 3 non-statutory top-up funding, specialist place planning, review of the 18 to 25 EHCP top-up, education, health and care plan top-up funding, and the review of post-16 out of authority funding. We are currently, to do this work, we procured a delivery partner, Social Finance and People Public Private Limited, who are delivering that work stream for us. It's currently out to consultation. There are a number of consultation events happening over the next 2 to 3 weeks before that consultation closes on the 13th of December, with a decision due at Cabinet in the early new year. So in terms of where we are in terms of our unmitigated forecast around this, so as part of our Delivering Better Value with SEND programme, we worked with a partner of the Department for Education, Newton Europe, who did a deep dive analysis of our projected overspend in the DSG, and as you can see in section 5.2, the unmitigated position at the end of 27-28 is expected to reach over £120 million. In section 5.5, the mitigations are broken down into what the proposed savings are in each of those work streams and projects to hopefully bring us to a point where we're starting to see a reduction in that deficit over the next 5 to 6 years. To oversee the delivery of that work, there's a programme team made up of myself and project officers and project managers, as well as Gary, who's been brought in as the strategic programme lead in this space. We're working with colleagues across the local authority and the education system to try and turn the tide on that deficit. And we have developed a governance structure which is outlined in section 5.10, which sets out how we're going to work with partners, or how we are working with partners across the SEND system, including health partners, schools, and how this aligns to the governance framework of Bristol City Council. And I think that's a general overview of where we are in terms of the DSG project.
Okay, thank you. Members, and at this point I should formally welcome Councillors Gollop, Fodder, Hopkins and Townsend, who are joining us for this section. Are there any questions, bearing in mind that what we're looking at here is the public paper and this is a public session? Councillor Gollop.
I'm going to start with just a very simple question, but as Audit Committee is charged with governance and monitoring governance, I'd just like to question the comment that this is scheduled to go to Cabinet, because it does it appear in the current medium term, in the Mayor's forward plan? I don't see it listed. I may have missed it, but I think this is a classic example of where these items need to be scheduled as to when they're coming, so that members of council and members of the public can be aware of it. I'm happy to be corrected and have it pointed out to me where it is, but on a quick glance I've missed it.
I believe it has already been taken through to Cabinet earlier in the year, so we may need to go back and double check, but something was presented to Cabinet. I don't know if you're aware, Tom, of
Yeah.
it went through to Cabinet, I think outlining these mitigations. It went through to Schools Forum in March, and I think the DVB programme was reported to Cabinet subsequent to that, but I'll wait colleagues to confirm.
Yeah, so an overview of the DSG programme went to Cabinet in October of this year for noting. There was no decision required in it. It was outlining the mitigation plans, and elements of the programme, as Denise has said, went to Cabinet previously, including the Delivering Better Value in SEND for a decision to support the £1 million grant funding from the DFE. The four elements of the consultation that are currently out, the four projects that are part of Workstream 2 of Delivering Better Value in SEND, will be coming to Cabinet in the early new year and will be part of the forward plan in December.
That was my point, Chair. It's not in the forward plan, and there is nothing mandatory that says that items should only be put on the forward plan 30 days before they're brought to Cabinet. And that's where I think the problem lies with issues of this significance.
It's a point well made, and I know you and others have made it in various forums in this council. It would be good to see these things on the forward plan well in advance, so you'll know what's coming down the track. Councillor Townsend, you indicated.
Well, it's just in response really to Councillor Gollop. There's an annual cycle of things that need to go to Cabinet for this ring-fenced budget. So I don't know why there is no reason why it can't be on there on an annual basis, because they come every year at the same time, because they have to set a budget.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilcox, you indicated.
Yes, I have a question about the actual papers themselves. On page 172, we talk about creating an additional 450 specialist provision places by 2024. How many existing specialist provision places are there, so that we can get a scale of how much we're actually increasing the number of specialist provision places by, please?
We don't, currently we're around 400 places short in terms of meeting our EHCP requirements. the current amount that we've got going through due to come online still leaves us short. So what we're currently doing, and this is about really where we're at, we need to understand more about what our sufficiency requirements are. So we have certain provision that's being made. We're not clear at the moment whether that provision is the right provision. We know that we'll utilise the spaces, but we suspect that against primary need, we will require additional spaces and additional primary needs. So most of that is targeted at our children with social, emotional and mental health issues. But we've got an increasing demand on autism, as you're probably aware, and we mustn't forget the other 7 areas of our primary as well. But there hasn't previously been any sufficiency planning, so we're picking that up now as a way forward. It's a priority for us because we want to make sure that the plans that we're putting in place are going to meet need, but we're not going to overbuild as well. We don't want to have spaces that we can't fill, because that's also a cost to us.
So, sorry to get bogged down in the numbers again, because we're here again. You've not said how many places you've actually got, and I can understand there's a broad spectrum of places where you will have so many for autism, so many for a different need, but you must have a total figure of how many centre places you do have at the moment, please.
Yeah, we do. I don't have them in front of me. I can only give you the ballpark figures.
We can get you that information. I don't have that information to hand.
I think it's very useful and pertinent for this discussion.
Can I respond, Councillor Wilcox? You don't have all of the team here who will be able to provide the answers to some of those questions. So colleagues have stepped in at the last minute to be able to build the gap, because you don't have your Director of Education, she's unwell, unable to attend, you don't have your capital team, and you don't have your accountant. So some of the information they're going to need to take back and then respond, but we do have details in terms of how many places we currently have. I think the point that Gary was making is that actually the provision being rolled out at the moment would only just or maybe short of meeting our current gap, but we also have to think of the forecasted gap for the future as well. So that's some of the work that colleagues have been doing, is looking at the forecast trajectory for the next 10 to 15 years and trying to work through the demand and need, and actually also ensure that there's going to be sufficiency of provision for planning forward, as well as dealing with our current challenges and our current backlog. But they can come back with more details to give you specifics in terms of how much we currently have. It's very clear that the amount being rolled out is not going to meet our forecasted needs. If we're going to change behaviours and start to think differently about in-authority provision and having some provision of our own, so that we don't need to use independent, non-maintained schools out of authority. So there's a need to create provisions so that we can actually do that transition as well. So all of that is coming through in some of the modelling that's taking place at the moment. And that's the area of saying that's still work in progress and not fully complete. So I think it's all of those different metrics coming together, but you'll need to have other colleagues here to be able to explain some of that, but we're happy to share that with you and maybe just provide you with a written response to some of that.
Sorry, David, just before you come in, I'll just offer my apologies here, because I should have made clear that the Director was unable to be here and wanted to take written. I think I had emailed audit members to notify them of that, but the other members here won't have been aware that unfortunately the Director is unable to attend today. So, but written questions can be taken away and we can get to answers. David, sorry, and then you come back.
I think that would be really useful in this discussion. Yes, thank you, Chair.
John? Yeah, can I just piggyback on the back of that point really, because I get that this is all about the lack of provision at the moment, and obviously really importantly forward provisioning. But from our point of view, when we're seeking assurance, those numbers of what we're lacking at the moment and what we may be lacking in the future are all in the context of the provision we currently have. And so without that number of what we currently have, it's just hard for us as laymen to put into context what we're talking about. You know, we could have 10 places at the moment and 400 is a massive gap, or we could have 3,000 and 400 is a smaller. So it's just for us to get the context.
We have over 200 pupils with EHCPs in our independent or maintained schools. They are high cost. All of our special places are taken up. We have 193 pupils that have an EHCP that are waiting for a place. So what we're looking at is, in the short term, how we can address that, and part of that is how we address looking at our alternative learning provision and building the quality of that and the number of places. Our alternative learning provision is changing its model, so it's going to be more early intervention. And clearly part of our plan has got to be to ensure that we can maintain children in mainstream school where that's the best outcome for them, without them having a plan, because the cost is plans. We must make sure that we provide plans for those children that need them, but we've also got to make sure we've got the right type of provision in place. So developing our current out providers to increase our capacity is one of our key strategies. And early intervention by the out team, so the alternative learning team, is about enabling schools to identify early and put in preventative measures which will support children in school, in mainstream school, rather than needing a plan. We've also got a range of work streams that are working on looking at the support that children need and their families need at that support level. So we've got 4 different pathways, looking at those pathways to independence, which is core in the requirement on SEN children. The early years, of course, is one of the key areas where we can do prevention and early intervention. And there's a simple example of that is that with early speech and language therapy support to children, we can prevent, for a large proportion, those children ending up with behavioural issues in mainstream school where mainstream can no longer cope, and that potentially then would increase our EHCPs, but with early intervention and prevention with families and children, we can support that. We have support for SEN children within primary and secondary school, and that's about teaching first and quality teaching through our graduated response. What we're looking at is actually how we can support the family to support the child more. And my example for this is when you've got your own children. Primary school sends reading books home and you sit there and you read with your child, and that helps them to progress. Some of the demands that are around children that need additional support in mainstream schools is higher than that. We need to give the support to parents and siblings to enable the success of that support, rather than the schools thinking that they've only got one opportunity, which is to refer children for a high level of support. So I think we're looking at, this is not a one fit. There's lots of things that we need to put right, and we're identifying what those things are, and sufficiency, and making sure we have the right type of provision to reduce our dependency on our independent, non-maintained schools is one of our ways that we will get to a balanced budget.
You make a really good point, and about the early intervention and the early identification. I have a child that's been waiting 1.5 years for an autism test. So do the council also work to improve the rate at which you can identify the children that need the special educational needs provision? Because obviously at the moment, I guess you're just working with the number of identified cases. There are lots of people also in the system waiting to be identified as well.
Yeah, and there are some parents who haven't identified. And so we're working with closely with our health colleagues. So this is about how health visitors contribute to this. And our work stream that works on that early years contains our early years providers, it contains health visitors, it contains speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, a whole range of people that will help us to identify what provision we've got, what provision we need, but more importantly, how to access that. And you're right, we have a local offer, which certainly needs developing and improving. But mostly people only understand about the local offer when they're in the system. It's when you don't know where you are that you don't have access to that, and that's what this early intervention is about. It's about creating, I want to call it a yellow brick road that identifies where you are on that and what sort of services you can access. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Fodder and Kate, and then if there's a Councillor Fodder first, and then I'll come to Councillor Gollop and Councillor Hopkins.
Thanks, Chair. The discussion that's just gone shows that it is very complex and it's got so many different sort of layers and levels. And the work stream 2, which is about work with stakeholders and having that sort of understood better, to me it is crucial because relationships are broken down. There are different types. The parents are stakeholders, the ones not in the system who don't feel the system is letting them in. And where their schools haven't recognised them or supported them. The schools have to be effective parts of the system, including the mainstream schools where the capacity has been lacking. Obviously the providers and the specialists and so on. The governance of that and just the management of relationships with stakeholders is crucial. How's that being handled? Because I see that in February that part is meant to be signed off, obviously, in the Cabinet. In terms of that part of the work stream, will it be in place for them?
So DVB work stream 2 that you referred to are those 4 elements looking at how we use top-up funding. So that's the piece of work that we brought in a delivery partner to do using DFE grant funding. That piece of work is the work that went behind that was lots of engagement with schools, with professionals in the SEND system, with colleagues across local authority as well who work in SEND, and looking at best practice from other local authorities nationally just to hopefully bring Bristol into line with the best practice nationally around this. As I say, the consultation is currently live. We've shared that widely. There are focus groups scheduled with parent carers, children, young people, school professionals, and again colleagues across the local authority to try and support the development of that piece of work. It is scheduled to come to Cabinet in the early new year for a key decision on how we use that top-up funding going forward. I don't see why we wouldn't come to Cabinet in the early new year for that.
Thanks. Can we be confident that the work with the parents, the work with the mainstream schools and others will have been able to be delivered? So not just the consultation, but then be confident that the remedial sort of processes, because they're quite sensitive, really, and they also require capacity in the schools and so on.
Yeah, we work with our Parent Carers Forum on a regular basis. They're engaged with all of the projects that we run from here, so we're always conscious that, that's a balance because they are a finite group and we want to make sure that we're utilising them in the best possible way. Some of our other projects are looking at how schools and parents work together, so we're supporting those through a few test and learn projects where we're learning actually what works. And we've got an event that will be coming up, I think around March time, where we'll start to share some of that learning. The problem with the test and learn is, of course, it's only with a small number of schools. And we don't have the facility to roll out some of the programs that are providing us with some valuable information. We're dependent on the schools probably taking on that responsibility. But one of our key areas is around inclusion and how we get partners to work together and be inclusive. So we particularly need our primary and secondary schools to be inclusive and have that level of approach. So we're hoping that what we learn will influence schools. We can't tell schools what to do. They have to work that out with us, hopefully. But it is about a cultural change, I think, to some extent, that this is a problem. We do have a problem and we've got to work together to solve it. It isn't just Bristol City Councils. This is a complex, wide-reaching part of our society. And we're working with those children that are our most vulnerable and have least life choices. So we're working hard to try and make sure that we're bringing people together to help get the best solutions.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Gollop and then Councillor Hopkins, and then Councillor Townsend again, and then I'll maybe look to draw the public, the examination or the questions on the public paper to a close. Councillor Gollop.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I have no idea what's in the confidential papers, so it may be that
what I'm about to ask would have been answered if I'd been able to see them. I presume members of the Audit Committee have seen the confidential papers.
Yes. Sorry, I'm advised that they should have been sent to you, but obviously something's...
Yes, councillors, when I sent you the appointment to attend the session, I sent you the papers in the attached appointment, so the exempt appendix was there. I can send it to you right now if that helps before going into that session.
That would be helpful, but I'm not used to that happening, so it did not occur to me to look at that. So it may be what I'm about to say is will be made redundant by that. But just hearing the comments made by members of the Audit Committee, I find looking at this report, it's positive. It tells lots of good things that we're aiming to do, but it doesn't put my mind at rest as to how we are turning the corner. It tells a story that I want to hear and an outcome I want to see. But Councillor Dieter mentioned the question about the HCPs that are there. And we have no idea from this report what the backlog is now, but I know for the past few years the backlog's increased each year. So actually that's been people where we don't even know what level of support they need because we haven't got them in the system. So we have a report that tells us how we're going to increase more places. That's good, but it tells us we're going to do it and reduce costs. And if it was that easy to reduce the costs, I feel we should be asking the question, why haven't we done it before? I suspect the answer is because it's not that easy to reduce the costs. In which case, what are the implications if we don't succeed in doing so? And I can't get any measure of the sense of risk, of what the contingent risk, contingent liabilities are upon the authority. Now that may be in the confidential papers, but it seems to me we are in danger of a double hit. We have the risk that we carry on increasing the deficit on the special needs block, which itself is bad enough, but if we do that, we also, as I understand it, will not get our deficit written off. We get hit twice. Now that is massive. And so what I was hoping to see today was a financial paper that actually gave us an indication of what the impact was on those issues and where it would hit the council. Because my guess is it would hit the council in the general fund and in the council tax payers' account. And I think we need to understand that. I'm very grateful for all the work the Schools Forum has done and is doing. But their responsibility is delivering on the school's service. It's not actually responsibility of delivering the balanced budget for the authority. And you know, I've outlined my concerns, but somehow between resources and audit and probably overview and scrutiny management, we need some pretty sound reassurances given pretty quickly. And at the moment, I don't feel they're there. But I'm very open to being persuaded. Thank you.
Okay. Denise, do you want to respond to that talk?
Okay. So all of the details are in various reports as opposed to all being contained within this report. But I think colleagues have tried to pull together the graph that you see in 5.2, which shows you your extrapolation line of your unmitigated forecast. If you are really saying, well, you know, how bad can this get if we don't turn the curve, then it's the extrapolation of your unmitigated, which is your do-nothing scenario. Your blue line on the graph is the plotting of the graph based on the mitigations that have been outlined by colleagues and things that are being pursued to try and turn the curve. And clearly they're going through the details in terms of the plans that are being proposed and the areas being explored as part of that. You are correct. It isn't it isn't easy because we are looking at whole systems, but there's been a lot of detailed work, diagnostics and analytical work undertaken by the team and also by the DFE, looking at benchmarking, looking at alternative data, which indicates the areas of which, one, that Bristol is an outlier, but others in areas where we need to focus. A lot of focus being put on specialist provision because a lot of where we are expending is out of authority placement. So actually if we're able to deliver on some of those ambitions about in-authority provision, then that will start to reduce the cost in terms of the unit cost of of providing the need for each child at each of the cohorts. So the two come together. The proposals are the proposals that aim to bridge that gap. But what you want is the more detailed schedule, which basically gives you the numbers behind each of those, of which we will have, but maybe not in this format, but it's generally in the papers that go to School Forum, which will give you the table with the data and the figures. And I'm not sure what's in the next set of slides, but it may be in there, but we can probably go through that in a bit more detail as well, and just talk through some of the detailed propositions. And I think if you're asking in relation to the statutory override, again, that's in all budget papers. I think we see that often at the statutory override, when the statutory override ends, and how much time we have to be able to come up with a detailed plan that shows the right trajectory and the right delivery.
Okay, I'm feeling we might be picking this up again at some point. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, three quick things. Firstly, we got the numbers that have been assessed but haven't yet been dealt with fully. So could we have the numbers that are actually in train and don't yet have the necessary certificate? Secondly, I'm very concerned with my experience both in schools and from casework as a counsellor, that there is a significant differentiation between those middle class parents who know what buttons to press and get things for their children, and some of the, shall we say, less advantaged parents who suffer in silence. Their children, and sometimes their conditions are significantly worse. And I'm not seeing anything which indicates a determined effort to actually tackle that problem. And thirdly, I share Councillor Gollop's concerns. I've seen some of these proposals, and I've heard them over the years. Not only have the figures been getting worse steadily, but we've got things which are practically motherhood and apple pie, and you have to say, why have these not been delivered? And what confidence can we have now that they will be?
We can't say why they haven't been delivered because we've not been here. I guess what we can say is that we're confident in the plans that we're putting together, the financials that go behind them, and I think as you'll see in stage 2 of this meeting are achievable. But I guess that the EHCP world is not a fixed finite world. Tomorrow, 4 children could be assessed and need £200,000 worth of treatment a year. That would be nearly another £1 million a year. We have to provide and meet those needs. That's what's required. So there are a lot of variables in this, and what we're trying to do is model the things that we can control and we can engage with. And I think our plans to reduce our dependency on the independent, non-maintained schools is our biggest chance of achieving success. We're looking at around £50,000 worth of saving per child if we can meet those same needs being delivered through an expansion of our provision locally. But I can't give you guarantees. Sorry?
First question was the number that are on the waiting list.
So our current average of 20 weeks or greater on our backlog is we're around 250 cases.
That's on the backlog for assessment. So we have 193 who've been assessed who are waiting for their appropriate placement.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious that I've got Councillor Townsend and Councillor Harker is trying to sneak in, but I'm also conscious that, you know, the time is running away. I was keen to give this some time though in the public forum, because I think that's important. I'm just going to use Chair's privilege and follow on from Councillor Hopkins' questions about how realistic the figures are. With a starter question, which is there's just over 2 million worth of mitigation/savings in this in the blue table on page 165 for the 23-24 tax year, and we're obviously halfway through that already. So are we confident in delivering those savings in this year? Given that, obviously longer term, things are maybe more variable, more difficult to predict, but in this year, are we going to deliver those savings?
They're actually a reviewed savings, so the original savings, because there was a delay in the start of this programme because of funding from the DFE as well, so the Delivering Better Value in SEND programme didn't begin until June, where in the original work that we did with the Department for Education, that was due to start in January, but that was indicative timings we were working on. So we have reviewed these savings targets over the year, and we are continuing to reflect on them. It is hope we'll be close to that level of saving.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Townsend, and then Councillor Harker, and then I will bring this session to a close and we'll go into the exempt session.
Thank you. You just asked my question, Chair. One of them. There are 2 mentions of school forum in this, and one of the presenting officers has mentioned school forum. I want to say a few things. The September school forum was not in the public domain, and I am following that up with the monitoring officer because it's a legal requirement that the public is allowed access to school forum meetings. So that scrutiny, whatever questioning has come forward from the leaders of every sector about papers that went to September, we're not aware, we don't know yet what issues they raised. I just want to make that as a point. The second point about school forum is that they actually make very, very few decisions. The vast majority of decisions of the local authority, they have to consult with school forum, but actually it's the authority. The entirety of the high needs budget is down to the local authority. I would like to ask a question about the governance sort of diagram at 5.10. Are there any areas within that governance table that by law requires the presence of the lead member for children's services within it?
Don't know by law which of those does. Apologies, I can find that information out, but I don't have the information to hand.
Okay, so can we A, qualify which one, if any, are required by law, and then secondly, which have political representation on them? Because obviously nobody in this room, there isn't any opposition representation there. And then I've got a couple of questions in relation to Appendix A, if that's okay. Because it's Appendix B that's...
Yeah, okay, I'm paranoid about this.
Yeah. Fair enough. So it says that, so Appendix A talks about 288 additional special school places between this September and next September. Do we know if we're on course to deliver those by full opening in September next year?
We are looking at some delays in some of those. Some of the actual Projects themselves are quite complex, and some of the buildings that we're trying to refurbish to provide the specialist places. We should be on track for the majority of those spaces for this phase, but there are a risk on one or two of those.
Okay, can we get a breakdown as to where we are then, because it's pretty crucial that we get the places, because it's the places that are out of area that we know are the real big costs, not only in relation to the high needs but also to the homeschool travel, which is our general fund. And what I had one more question, and it was really about the table that looks at the delivery of the projects. It's quite out of date. And I'm just wondering, Chair, if that's because it's audit and you look back at stuff. Because I'm aware that some of these projects are more further forward than what's being reported.
Which table was that? Sorry. Is it the one on page 165? Which might mean nothing to you because you're maybe not looking at the audit papers.
Name of scheme, status, narrative. A1, A2?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just that I'm aware that there's a number of things in here that are further forward as we speak than what are reported here, and it might just be that this is audit and you look back. So the consultation is out, isn't it, for example, around top up,
yep.
And it says here that you're going to do it, and some of the dates are quite old.
Yep. This was the list of updates where we was taken to Cabinet in October. So the dates reflect that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hucker, you have sneaked under the radar, so one last question, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to gain a greater understanding of the financing of the deficit on the DSG. As I understand it, the deficit is effectively being carried forward as a kind of negative reserve. But if the statutory override is not extended beyond 2026, I believe it will need to be written off against a usable reserve. But I can't actually see any usable reserves in the accounts that it could be written off against. So I wondered what the scenario would then be. And also, I'd like to know how the deficit is currently being funded. I assume it's from existing cash surpluses, which arose as a result of borrowings from the Public Works Loans Board, which themselves, I guess, would have been drawn down to finance capital expenditure. But as there's been significant slippage in the capital programme, it appears to me that the surpluses are funding this deficit. I'm happy to be corrected on that, and I hope I will be corrected on that. But I'd like some assurance of the key point as to what happens if the statutory override isn't extended, and what reserve it would be written off against.
That's probably one for me. So if we look at the way in which the deficit has built up over the years, it's grown from a deficit of approximately 3 million to the position as at the end of the last financial year of close to 39, call it £40 million deficit, forecasted to be 58 million deficit by the end of 23-24 financial year. Now, the statutory override that was put in place will enable the local authorities to carry that as a negative reserve, as you'd outlined, and to account for it separately. That's separately from your actual DSG balances. Should you actually have a surplus on a specific item, you'd have to separate that out. So carrying a negative reserve, you're carrying a negative reserves across all of the council's usable reserves. You don't allocate it against either or, so actually if you've got surpluses in your school's reserves or any other usable reserves, it's really just carried as a negative reserve. In your balance sheet you see the deficit line that builds up, and will continue to until we actually get to a position where we get to a statutory override where there isn't the ability to then continue to carry a deficit. At that point then there will need to be discussions with DLARC, the DFE, our external auditors and also ourselves in terms of where are we in the programme, what is the plan, what's the approach and what other reserves are there available. We can't predetermine the outcome, we don't know what the reserve will be, we don't know what the decision will be by each of those bodies, whether DLARC will extend further or not, or what progress we would have made as a council in terms of actually starting to turn that curve and mitigate. We have obviously done some forecast in terms of where we think we'll be in our mitigation plans if all of the matrix come to fruition, but there is also lots and lots of variables, lots of assumptions. There's also assumptions around future funding levels, etc. for each of the year of the deficit. So I think the only point that I'd make is that there will be a deficit still at the end, even if all of our plans come to fruition, there will still be a deficit within the DSG. And I think the decision will be based on the level of progress being made, whether we're making a positive trajectory, etc., and also the scale of that. And that will also be viewed in terms of how much do we have in our schools reserves and a whole range of other reserves. Whilst we mentioned there are no usable reserves, the council has significant usable reserves at present. But reality, I can't say what the position will be at the end of 27 when the statutory override initially comes to an end.
Thanks, Denise. Okay, let's move on then to item 19, which is the exclusion of press and public. So under section 100A, brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public will now be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act. So